Hi, this is Wels Southerner. The title of my comments today is entitled Wels Lutherans Seem to Hate the Confessional Seal. I tell myself again and again to stay away from Wels Facebook groups. I read more corrupt doctrine in them than in Arius's living room. As far as liturgical practice goes, these groups are strongholds of Second Great Awakening attitudes towards Christian worship. Well, a few days ago, the state of Washington passed a law making clergy mandated reporters of child abuse, including information learned in private confession to a priest or pastor. I would say that 3 out of 4 commenters on a certain Wels Facebook group approved of the law and condemned clergy who refused to break the seal of confession. People who were sorry for their sins need to be assured that the pastor who pronounces absolution over the penitent will not blab their sins all over town or to the authorities. Of course, a good pastor will encourage the penitent to report him or herself to the authorities if a crime is committed. A sensible pastor will refuse to absolve someone who happens to mention a sin and then backs off and states he will do it again. Another issue of turning clergymen into mandated reporters is that makes them an agent of the state rather than of God's holy church. We Lutherans, especially in the early years of our movement, were under German and Scandinavian state churches, but it was always understood that a pastor's primary loyalty was to God. Making pastors into police is a confusion of the kingdom of the left and the kingdom of the right. Your pastor isn't a cop. Another issue that needs to be addressed are issues related to what some states might call minor child abuse. Some very foolish liberal states, in their crazed leftist fanaticism, have made things like the spanking of children essentially illegal. In my own state, deep in the heart of Dixie, spanking is all right, unless the parent leaves marks that last several days. Will a pastor get locked up if he fails to report a spanking heard in formal confession? It's a slippery slope. For 4 years of my life, I was a mandated reporter in my state. I was a child protective worker for my state government. It was my job to investigate claims of child abuse and neglect and administer foster care. It was a tough job. The average worker in that field in my state lasted just 6 months due to the stress and pressure. Did I see some horrible stuff along the way? Sure. I saw a lot of false claims of abuse and neglect from women trying to get the whip hand over their ex-husbands in a divorce situation. A lot of phony claims came from feuding neighbors. I wouldn't make a false claim on anybody for child abuse, even if a war criminal were living next door. At any rate, I know what's in stake in these situations of child abuse. Still, I appreciate the stakes in this debate. Once again, I can assert that Lutherans in America are being influenced by the theology of their pietistic and revivalistic neighbors. I don't mind a well-catechized fellow layman watching the half-lunatic preachers on the telly. He or she should be able to pick out the crappy doctrine right away. On the other hand, those who were picking their noses and throwing spitballs during their confirmation instruction years ago, have a half-hearted prayer life, avoid church Bible study like the plague, and snore through sermons, might be vulnerable to the dubious charms of our American evangelical neighbors. I add to this the poor deluded souls who have the misfortune of being members of Wels Co-wo congregations. It's in this kind of church environment that scorn for the sacraments and for confession and absolution begins. Formal confession to the pastor isn't required in Lutheranism, but it is made available. It's a tragedy that it is so rarely used by our people. While I'm speculating, I think it likely that there are hundreds of members of Wels congregations walking the streets who feel unforgiven for their sins and live in a state of existential dread and sadness. A lot of these people with troubled consciences should be liberated from their miseries by confession to a pastor. Pastors need to mention the availability of private confession from the pulpit or in Bible studies. This is Wels Southerner signing off.